Mystic Mice, Matsuri Minis, Erroneous Abbreviation. Join us for these topics and more today on the Passport Game Studios podcast, where adventure awaits. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Passport Game Studios podcast, where adventure awaits. I'm your host, Chaz Marler, the social media and support manager here at Passport Game Studios. But I'm not alone here, because sharing the mic with me again this week are going to be Ryan Skinner and Scott Morris, who will be joining me to discuss this week's topic of give and take in games. Maybe. The discussion may require a little give and take. We'll get to that in a minute, though. So, Ryan, how have you been doing, and what have you been playing recently?
I've been doing well. I have been playing a bunch of stuff. I could speak to a number of games that I played in the last couple weeks, which were some new releases that happened at Essen, but the one I'm most excited about, I haven't actually played yet. I'm hopefully getting to the table tonight of recording this, which is the King's Golem, the expansion for Alchemists from Czech Games Edition. Alchemists is just far and away one of my all-time favorite board games I've ever played. It just melts my head every time that I play it, and even when I lose, it's just super entertaining. And adding more and more layers of deduction and complexity with the King's Golem just makes me more excited to go and lose. But yeah, I'm excited for that one.
Does the King's Golem add just additional items to the game, or does it actually add new options and new facets to the gameplay?
Oh, it's got a whole bunch of new facets. It's actually a four-piece modular expansion. So you've got, if I can remember them all correctly, you've got a small one that you can add on that just simply gives you variable starting resources. So like you can start with some ingredient cards, or you can start with some extra money or extra favor cards, and those are dealt out randomly, I believe. So you can do that. That's just one addition. The next piece of the expansion is modifying the turn order track and what the rewards are for where you choose to put your little vial for the turn order. So instead of the stationary or the fixed number of resources, whether you get 2 or 3 ingredients or favor cards or money or what have you, that changes each round, and there's some new elements that get mixed into that as well. There's then 2 additional ones, the third and the fourth modules, that add a whole bunch of crazy stuff. New levels of deduction where you're trying to bring the King's Golem to life, and you're trying to find which of the 2 ingredients in the game specifically bring the Golem to life in your game. Because as you may or may not be aware, the ingredients are totally randomized each time you play, and as far as what mixes with what and so forth. So you're trying to figure that out. There's now night and day designations. There's a better name for it in the game, I think, but all the ingredients are either night or day categorized, in addition to having their 3 alchemical traits. It adds all kinds of crazy new stuff. So yeah, like I said, very, very excited to play that, even though I haven't actually played it yet. That's like all my brain's been wrapped around right now. So,
yeah, you're switching it up. You've actually taken our typical way of doing this and turn it on its head. So,
yeah,
I guess with everything in today's episode, there's got to be a little bit of give and take here with the way you want to do things.
That's right.
But that sounds really interesting. Let's see though if Scott can bring us back to the norm, bring us back on track. What have you played recently, Scott?
If you're worried about me bringing everyone back to the norm, we got an issue. First off, hi everyone. Welcome back. I'm very happy to be here as always. And I have been playing a lot of time stories from Space Cowboys and, of course, Asmodee. It's a very highly interesting and unique game because it's not really a board game and it's not really a role-playing game. It's kind of a mixture of both. It's something that I played initially when it first came out and enjoyed it, but it is a very, very heavily group-dependent type game. And unfortunately, the people that I had started playing it with were just kind of flat on it. And we just started up recently again doing a new group, and we went through 2 of the different cases that they have. And it's just really fun for me because I unfortunately don't get to role play a lot because it involves so much time and coordination and getting everybody together. but this is a really good way to kind of collapse a longer possible session of role playing into a more shorter, focused session, I would say. And it turned into a lot of fun because we did the Under the Mask, which was the Egyptian one, and then we did Prophecy of Dragons, which actually disappointed me because I thought it was going to be something else, and it really wasn't. But that's okay because it was still a good experience. It was just, I guess disappointed is probably the wrong word. Probably just didn't meet the expectations I had going in. But Under the Mask was really good and very unique. I don't want to give it away because the games don't really have too much replayability to them, which I guess is one of the gripes some people have. But it's well worth it if you have the time to check it out and have a group that can get behind their characters and get into the narrative. It's almost like Quantum Leap, the board game.
Right, that's exactly right. Yeah, I was going to ask, so you said you've played with a couple different groups. Have you yourself replayed any of the modules?
I did, yeah. I have replayed the main module and the Marcy case. And it's there. I mean, you can definitely make different decisions, and obviously there is a scoring mechanism at the end that, if you finish on the first time, you're going to get more points than if you fail and have to go back in. But there was some points during both of those that it was, okay, keep your mouth shut and let people make their own decisions, which is, was a little harder, which I think that's where the replayability comes into a challenge. I think the thing that really benefits the game the most is having a group of people. First off, having 4 people. Don't try to play it with 2 or 3. It just doesn't work as well, in my opinion. But having 4 people who are open and have the understanding that nobody really knows the rules, and you're going to learn it together as you go. Even if you've played before, like new cases just completely change things. So if you have people that have a hard time adapting like that, then I can see where it may fall flat for them. But if you have people who are awe-inspired gamers, then that would be a good thing to do. So that's what I've been playing a lot of.
Huh, that's cool. Yeah, I've never really seen it. I've played through everything except for Under the Mask, and I've never really seen it as a kind of role-playing replacement, so to speak, as you put it, but I guess in the same way that it's kind of telling a story more than it's a strategic game experience. I guess that kind of makes sense in that way. So
Yep, exactly.
That's cool. What about you, Chaz, the host? What have you been playing?
Well, before I get to what I've been playing, I just wanted to mention about Time Stories. I'm glad you mentioned I'm glad you mentioned disappointment when it comes to Time Stories. I mean, the game itself is great, and you're right, it is very group dependent. But every time I play it, I can't help but get completely distracted by the fact that the title of the game, Time Stories, time is an abbreviation. Except only the T, the I, and the M on the cover of the box have little dots after them. There's no dot after the E. So is it Tim E Stories? Or why is that? And it just distracts me.
I noticed that right away as well, and it bugs the heck out of me.
If you're a grammar hound, this is not your game.
Maybe they'll fix that in an expansion or something.
Maybe, who knows?
Maybe they'll address that. Anyway, one of the games I've played most recently that wasn't even on my radar beforehand, so it was kind of a pleasant surprise, is IDW's The Godfather: A New Dawn. I really dig games that use dice in interesting ways. And this game utilizes dice to allow players to each be controlling a crime boss family, and they're trying to take over districts and neighborhoods in New York. And there's 6 different districts, 1 through 6, numbered 1 through 6 for the 6 sides of a dice. And each of these 6 districts has little neighborhoods in them. And one neighborhood might require like a pair of matching numbers, or 3 of a kind, or even a run that includes a certain number. So the players are rolling their dice, and then on their turn, they're using what they rolled to make sets and runs to take over, move their little gangster meeples into the different neighborhoods in New York. And at the end of the game, whoever has the most neighborhoods in each district will gain points, and whoever has the most points at the end wins. However, what kind of put the neat twist on this game is each round, the player with the most muscle on this separate track that keeps track of the muscle, therefore called the muscle track of all things. The player with the most muscle is the Godfather. And the Godfather first gets, before people start placing their dice on the board, the Godfather is given the opportunity to take a dice away from each player. So each player rolls their dice and then secretly in their dice pool chooses one that they think is expendable or maybe will be the most advantageous for them to get rid of and offers it publicly to the Godfather. And the Godfather can either take it and the person who gives it to them gets a small reward. And there's 6 different rewards that match the number that you're giving them. Or the Godfather can say, hey, I don't want that dice. I want a dice with this other number instead. And if the player has one of those, they got to give it to the Godfather. So what's really neat is you start having to figure out, do I give away a dice that benefits, do I give away a dice that's the most expendable for me, or the one that maybe I need but is going to be least helpful to the Godfather? Or do I know that whatever dice I give, I'm going to get that special power for later in the round. So do I just bite the bullet and give away a dice that's going to give me a better power later on? And so every decision you make has this pro and con to it. And my game group that I played it with, we played it. It was our first game, so we learned it and played it. It's like, hey, that was cool. Put it away. We got out another game that was really hyped at Gen Con, and we set it up. And we sat through the rules and started playing the first round, and all 5 of us looked at each other with the same look on our face. And finally someone broke the ice and said, do you want to put this game away and play the Godfather one again? And we did. We went back and played it the second time. So it was a really, really big hit, and it's actually, I would say, it's easily become one of my favorite games of the year.
You come to me on the day of my daughter's wedding with these dice.
I was going to say, you got to be careful with the phrase "bite the bullet" talking about the Godfather. Just saying.
Yeah, it's true.
So there's the 3 games that each of us had played recently. So as always, kind of to break the ice or mix things up a little bit, we've got a little mini game about these three games. And this time, here is the scenario you are presented with. Okay, Ryan, we'll start with you.
Okay.
If you and these games suddenly fell backwards through time, back to colonial America. Okay, of the 2 games that you didn't play, so the 2 other games, which one would you demonstrate to Benjamin Franklin and why?
Oh my goodness!
Wow. Just for the record, this is completely unscripted here, so this is going to be really interesting.
Right. Pretty incredible choice in games between The Godfather and Time Stories for a go back in time and present. I feel like, let's see, Benjamin Franklin, huh? I feel like Time Stories, I'd have to go with that. I mean, the gangster theme in general could probably still resonate. Maybe then, I don't know. I don't know if that really fits the time frame. But without the films, I don't know if anyone really cares about The Godfather. But Time Stories, on the other hand, I think that concept, especially if I'm there from the future with a game about going back in time, like I think he'd buy into that. I think he'd go for that.
I think it would go over well. I think he'd appreciate the similarity there, the synergy in the pick with what just happened to you.
Right.
Okay, Scott, same question.
I love the idea of this question because one of my favorite things to ask people is if you could play one game with any one person, real or fictional, alive or dead, who would it be and what would the game be? So I think this is a fun thing. I would go Alchemists. I mean, given who Benjamin Franklin is and, having, lightning and all that stuff in his past and our past, I think it would make for a fun time seeing his, pardon the pun, but reaction to the reactions. Being able to, explain, hey, this is a puzzle and this is, we don't know what these things are going to do. It leans itself to the experimentation side of who Benjamin Franklin was. So I think that would be pretty hip and pretty cool. Right after we had about a 4-day conversation about politics. So, how about you? I mean, you're sticking with the same person. You're not allowed to change people.
With Benjamin Franklin, I would probably also pick Alchemists, but for a different reason, interestingly enough. I would pick it because of the incorporation of the iPad into it, because then I could show him, the iPad and how that works. And, after overcoming the accusations of being a warlock, I would just demonstrate that it was just modern technology, and I would probably, be appointed, for the next presidential position and probably, take over the world. So that's so same game, but slightly different reasons.
A lot of faith in the power of the iPad.
I was just going to say, yeah.
Enough to let you take over the world, huh? Just with an iPad. Wow.
Well, if it can take down an alien invasion on Independence Day, I'm sure that it can help our country on this holiday as well.
Right.
Perfect logical sense. I'm with it. Let's go.
Yeah.
Thank you. So,
fantastic.
Since we're all in agreement there, let's continue on to our main topic for the day, which was intended to be give and take. But as we'll see in a moment, I think even our topic of give and take may require a little bit of give and take. And the reason why I chose this topic is because the game that this episode centralizes around today is Mythe, which is a new game coming out from Ludi Creations, published by Passport, which is this nice little family game in which up to 5 different players are playing the parts of these different mice in the kingdom of Mythe, who are going on a quest to save their sacred cheese, which is like the symbol of hope for the kingdom. So the sacred cheese has been stolen by the evil and nasty red dragon, and so the players need to make their way down this path to the red dragon's lair, play the right cards, and rescue the sacred cheese and restore hope and prosperity to their kingdom. And the way that they're going to do this is that each space on the board requires 1, 2, 3 or more different movement points to move on to. So there's maybe a couple dozen movement spaces on the board, and the players are going to have to accumulate movement points to keep making progress towards the red dragon's lair. And the way you obtain these movement points is that each player has a hand of cards, and the cards have 1, 2, 3, etc. different movement points. Except some of the cards are danger cards and will end the player's turn. And the way that they end the player's turn is that the active player is going to be choosing without seeing. So they're going to be randomly choosing different cards from their opponent's hands, and whatever movement points they obtain that way, they're going to be able to use on their turn. However, if they unfortunately grab one of these danger cards from an opponent's hand, their turn's going to end immediately and they make no progress. So it has kind of this push your luck aspect, but you are taking cards from each of your opponents. And after your turn is over and you have moved your mouse down the path, the last thing you do on your turn is you redistribute the cards back to yourself and the other players. So you get to give the cards back and choose. So you got this whole give and take, and depending on which cards you end up taking and which cards you end up giving back and to whom, you'll be changing the ebb and flow of this game for better or worse for yourself and the other players. So when I was looking at Mythe and looking at the core concepts that the game is built on, what I saw in this game was this give and take aspect to it. But it turns out that as we were having the discussion about it, both Ryan and Scott saw completely different aspects of the game, which fascinated me because Mythe is such a simple little game. I thought it was amazing that we could find such different aspects about it to discuss. So why don't we turn over? Scott, I'm going to start with you first. Why don't you talk about the aspect of Mythe that stood out to you, and then another game that kind of utilizes that same aspect for comparison. Then we'll do Ryan and his game, and then we'll come back and I'll wrap up with the game that I thought utilized the give and take aspect for comparison.
Sure, yeah. So Mythe, I want to tell a little story before I do this, because Mythe is a game that I'm really proud of that we're involved with. I tend to be as open and forward-thinking as humanly possible. And when the original version of Mythe was presented to me, I noticed that there were changes. We work with Ludi Creations, who's our partner overseas, and they are a wonderful partner, and they have great concepts for games and very artistic concepts for games. Earlier in the year they did, and then we held hands with us, and it was just a great game success. This one is unique because when I looked at it, the minor difference, and it's going to seem silly and trivial and minor, but for me, it means something. And I just want to make sure people kind of get a little bit of backstory to this. The original game of Mythe was the Mice Warriors were going to defeat the evil red dragon to rescue the princess that he had stolen away from the kingdom and trapped in his cave. And now you are Mice Warriors in our version of Mythe with Ludicreations, that you are fighting the evil red dragon to basically reclaim the sacred cheese, as Chaz described. And that seems very minimal and very minor of a change, but I love it. And I've actually talked to the people at Ludicreations about this, and they had, made the decision in talking with us and other people about, hey, this is a great idea to change this little thing, because when you present a game to children, and this is a game that children can play and it's a game that adults can play, and when you present a game to a child who has that mentality of, everything in the world is great, or, to paraphrase, everything is awesome, and a little girl is told that she has to go rescue the princess, the first thing that most little girls nowadays say is, well, why can't the princess be a warrior? Like, why can't she be one of the mice people trying to go save things? So it's a very subtle thing, but as a father of a daughter, I think it's a very cool change, and I really, really like things like that. It was really cool. Rob, one of the people on our staff, Rob Miracle, had a hand in that, and it's really, really cool idea behind that. So, but all that said, the two aspects of the game are, one, pressing your luck and getting cards from your opponents that will help you progress down the pathway to the red dragon's lair. And the other aspect, which to me is where the real meat of the game comes into play, is redistributing that information. And for me, that's a big bluffing mechanic. If the three of us are playing and I draw a 1 and a 3 from Chaz and a 2 and an obstacle card, which is one of the skull cards that ends your turn, from Ryan, you guys now know that I have 5 points of movement in my hand, plus one of the skulls. So when I redistribute the information, it becomes the question of, did I give away the points so that I could get them on a different turn? If I did I give them all to one person? I mean, some of you are going to know some of the information. If I give one card to Chaz and one card to Ryan, there's some information but you don't know all of it. And it becomes a very subtle layer of bluffing. And I really, really like that. The game, to me, that jumped out at me when I was thinking about things like this was Masquerade by Bruno Feduti. It is one, I think came out like 2013. It is a really, really fun and surprisingly fun game, because when you first look at it, you see this very thin, small box, and you're like, oh, okay, I don't know how much game there really is inside of this. And it kind of takes you by surprise, because one of the first things you see on it is 2 to 13 players. And you're like, whoa, how can a game play well with 2 players and play well with 13 players? But it's really kind of cool, because the whole concept of Masquerade is that you are at this masquerade ball and you have masks on and you are declaring who you are. You may declare one turn that you are the king. You may declare one turn that you are the judge. And each character has a different action that they let you do in terms of collecting coins and things like that. But what happens is, if I declare I'm the king, other players have to then either confirm and agree, yeah, okay, he's the king, or someone can basically call me out and say, no, you're not. And of course, if the card in front of me is not the king, and I say I'm the king, whoever is the king then knows that they could successfully call me out. And there becomes this, again, another kind of small little layer of bluffing to, okay, should I call him out now? Should I wait till later? What's going to happen with passing cards around and things that can change inside the game? And even though it is the primary aspect of the game, it's a very subtle layer of timing yourself. When do you do these things? And the same thing happens in Mythe. When you get cards, there's certain times in the game that it might be better for you to hold them, might be better for you to give them away. And when you do give them away, who do you give them to? And it becomes such a very fun, subtle bluffing mechanic of, okay, I know he did this last time, but what's he going to do now? And I know he did this the turn before, but did he do the same thing again now? And it's really, really fun. And to me, that's where the meat and potatoes is for Mythe, is in that redistribution of information.
Oh, yeah, that's really cool. That's a very different approach. Yeah, I've never really considered Mythe bluffing, but when you put it that way. I'm probably playing it on a little more of a two-dimensional scale. So, yeah,
And there's nothing wrong with that.
right? Sure, yeah. I think that's one of the great strengths of the game is that it is so wide. It has such a wide reach in that it can be played very straightforward with a younger audience, or a little more cerebral with more core gamers. So.
Well, Ryan, then, since you've played it more on a two-dimensional level, which I think is fantastically ironic given the game's 3D pop-up playing board, what aspect of the game, then, is it that stood out to you?
So for me, since it was introduced to me, I've just considered it a hand management game, which I think most people would agree with. And so when reflecting on that as a mechanic and just thinking of what other hand management type games I could compare it to, I had a hard time finding anything that was really similar, even in that, kind of mechanism, even within the umbrella of hand management. There's obviously tons of things to choose from, but Mythe just does it in such a unique way with like you said, with the give and take. So my initial thoughts when I think hand management, I come from a background in gaming of trading card games. I played Magic, way back when I was younger, when it was in its infancy, and moved into Star Wars collectible card game from Decipher, back in the day, and played World of Warcraft trading card game for many years competitively, and then moved into, now I'm playing the Game of Thrones living card game from Fantasy Flight, which I adore. So I'm all about card games beyond traditional board gaming, and those are hand management games at their core. I mean, there's obviously so much more going on in a game like Magic or any thing in that kind of zone, with different strategies and how you build your decks and all those type of things. But the hand management of basically, here's the 5 or 6 or 7 cards I have to work with. What do I choose to do now? What do I choose to do later? If I do this now, what is that telegraphing to my opponent? What is that telling them? So it does kind of have that same information share that Mythe has. But even just as we've been talking here and I've been listening, I was kind of thinking more on it, and I think there's elements of traditional trading card games, not as much in the living card games space, but in traditional trading card games that fit maybe even a little closer, which is more of the card drafting as opposed to the actual gameplay itself. When you do a card draft and you are picking a card from this and passing information to your neighbor, assuming you have an 8-person table and you're passing around a 15-card pack, you're going to see the same cards come by a couple times, and you're using that information to figure out what other people have done, and again, it kind of has a give and take feel when you're deciding, what do I keep now, what am I telling my neighbor by the cards that I'm passing him, what signals am I giving, all that type of stuff. So yeah, the trading card game world, while way more robust and complicated and complex than Mythe at their core, respectively, I think there's some parallels there, which is really interesting. That's not to say I think that Mythe is an auto fit for trading card gamers, but I think people who play trading card games might find that hand management element of Mythe a little more interesting than it might look on the surface.
I think that's interesting because when we were talking about this, not recording, and you had mentioned about trading card games, the first thing my brain goes to is trading card game versus living card game. And there's a very big difference between the two. But in both cases, the first thing my brain went back to think about was Hearthstone. And I initially had told you, no, I don't know if they necessarily are hand management games. And then it started making me think, in Hearthstone, which is technically a digital trading card game, if you blow through your hand too quick, there's a very good chance you could get outpaced and you're going to lose. So there's a balance to that. So it's definitely, and then I thought back to my time in Magic and Android Netrunner and things like that, and that hand management is a huge piece of that. So yeah, I think it's a really, even though you let in with the two-dimensional piece of it, I still think that is an extremely valid way to look at Mythe, and a lot of people will. I think it shows the diversity of the game.
And that's what I thought was so interesting, is that there's so many different aspects of this little simple family game that, each of us saw. And like I mentioned, the one that I saw was the give and take aspect. Every interaction I have has both a level of a positive and negative consequence for myself and my opponents. And another game that I think pulls this off really well is a game called Odin's Ravens. This is a game for just 2 players, and it's a pretty simple game. It's pretty straightforward. In the game, you line up a row of 16 cards, and the cards have land on them, different types of land, plains and mountains and rivers and lakes and stuff like that. And one player starts on one end of it, and the other player starts on the other end of this track. And the object of the game is to get your raven to the other end of the track. So you're both racing over the same landscape, just from opposite ends of it. Now, the trick is that the players are going to be messing around with that landscape, changing some of the land types to different land, adding some land to certain areas, and stuff like that. And what you have to do is time it just right so that when you add, change, or remove land from the path, you simultaneously do it at a time and place that helps you while hindering your opponent. Every modification you make to the path is a give and take between helping yourself and either helping or hindering your opponent. And like Mythe, I think Odin's Ravens is a game that does that superbly well.
The decisions that your opponent's actions force you to make is really interesting. Because it is one of those games that there's only so many spaces to go, and one little move can completely change your strategy, and in both a negative and a positive way, which is really interesting. So I think it's a great comparison.
I think that all definitely applies, and I think that trying to balance what you do versus what you open up to other people is a core part of that game. So.
Well, excellent. So yeah, it's like I said, I found it really fascinating that there's so many different things that could be pulled out of this simple game, this little simple game called Mythe. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time to expand on what you guys saw and give the examples of the other games that kind of collaborate those ideas. The next thing to collaborate on is going to be collaborating on an answer to today's viewer question, or listener question, I guess, since very rarely are people sitting here next to me watching us record the show.
Right, very rarely.
Yes. But so today's question is based on a post by Evan on the Passport Game Studios Facebook page. And here's what he wants to know. Tokaido Deluxe added plastic figures for all of the characters in both the original Tokaido and the Crossroads expansion, which is really great. But there's also this Matsuri expansion, which currently is figureless. So are there plans to release plastic minis for the characters in the Tokaido Matsuri expansion? And if so, what's the timeline? And looking behind the curtain, what's actually involved in creating plastic minis in the first place?
Oh, wow. Yes, and a lot.
Yeah. I'll let you steal this one, Scott.
Yeah. So yes, there definitely is going to be a set of miniatures for Matsuri. If you were part of the Kickstarter campaign that FunForge ran, they had the Matsuri miniatures as part of, I believe, the Samurai level, and you could get all of them. But right now, if you buy the Tokaido Deluxe, which is the one that we help them distribute in North America, you're only going to get the Crossroads and the base set, so you're not going to get the Matsuri minis. And the nice thing about it, if you have the Deluxe set, you know this already, there's a little box when you open the game up, and it says Tokaido on it, and it just kind of is filling up space. And we've had some people email us or call us, or as Chaz says, shout at you on the street, and they're like, "What is this? What is this box for?" It's like an empty box. Did you guys forget to send me something? When in fact, that is actually the space for the tray for the Matsuri minis. So when that extra additional expansion comes out for the minis for Matsuri, they will be able to go into your Tokaido Deluxe box, whether you have owned it or whether you are buying it now. For anyone who doesn't know, it is available for the holidays again. It's something we've talked to FunForge about as a holiday type item, and we are shipping that out to distributors and retailers right now. So yes, they are coming, and they're really cool, and they're beautiful, and they're awesome. The latter question, I think, was like what goes into making the miniatures. And that's a lot. that's a podcast on its own, I think. I would say, in short, a lot of art, a lot of digital rendering, a lot of cost for molding, and a lot of patience, because it's very rarely correct the first time, and it takes a little bit of tweaking.
Right.
So if you've seen, or if you haven't seen, if you go to our website at passportgamestudios.com, you go under the games and you go under Tokaido Deluxe, you can see some of the miniatures. They're absolutely gorgeous. Brittany Bebo, some people may know her from GameWire, has a lot of great pictures of self-painted figures that she's done online as well. So I would definitely recommend to go check that out. She's a great artist. It's a hidden talent that she doesn't really promote enough, but she's very, very good at it. But yeah, the miniatures are great, and definitely looking forward to that. In terms of time frame, I think that was the third part. Time frame is we're thinking probably beginning of next year. Tokaido is a FunForge product, and we're their partner for North America, so obviously it's up to them when it comes out. They haven't set any hard street dates or anything like that, but I would say hopefully by beginning to middle of next year, we'll be able to have those out and get them in people's hands, because definitely some of the Matsuri characters are some of the more fun characters inside the world Tokaido to play, and it'd be nice for anyone who doesn't have minis to have minis for them.
Once again, I agree.
Give the governor a harumph.
And the minis, the Matsuri minis, when they're released early next year, they're not going to be the pre-painted versions like came with some of the advanced Tokaido Kickstarter backers, right?
No, the painted ones were only for the Samurai Pledge levels on the FunForge Kickstarter at a certain level. So those are, I think, done and gone at this point. The ones that you'll get will be unpainted, but still highly detailed and obviously capable of being painted. Like I said, if you want to go check out Brittany's Twitter, Bebo, GameWire girl, she's got pictures of ones that have been painted, which are really, really good looking.
Cool. Well, with that recommendation, we're going to cap off our own discussion here so that people can go and do that. And we're going to invite everyone to continue the discussion about give and take and the other topics that we discussed today over on our own social media pages over at facebook.com/PassportGameStudios, and hit us up on Twitter where we are at Passport Games. And while you're there, please note that we welcome your questions and comments and may even feature them on an upcoming episode. So contact us and let us know what's on your mind. But for now, thank you all so much for joining us for this episode of the Passport Game Studios podcast. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks to explore, another topic about board games and the board game industry. In the meantime, we'll also be posting some game overviews and playthroughs over on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/PassportGameStudios. Until then, thanks for joining us. And remember that, not only board games, but life too is a journey where adventure awaits.